Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
And welcome back to another edition of Issues in Education. Mondays during the Noon Report, we spotlight the issues impacting our public school families with a good Dr. Ralph Kerr at the Teaching and Learning Institute in Houghton, New York. Ralph, welcome back to the program. Sir, got a quick question for you. Have you finished shoveling all that snow yet?
Well, when you're retired like I am, you don't have to worry about that. Hopefully it'll get warmer and it'll melt itself.
I think you're right. We're looking at mid-60s by midweek, so can't wait for that. But we've got so much to talk about. Let's begin with the teacher shortage problem in New York. The education industry really going to be hit hard with this in the not-too-distant future. How bad is it going to get, Ralph, and what's being done to mitigate the problem?
Well, it really is going to be bad. The New York State Teachers Retirement System is projecting that at least a third of the current teachers in New York could retire within the next 5 years. And if that happens, there's going to be a need for about 180,000 teachers in the next decade in New York State alone. Nearly half of all public schools have vacancies today.
Yeah. Well, all of us are feeling that pain at the pump, Ralph. I imagine the school districts are as well. I can't imagine those yellow buses are real fuel efficient. But they've never been this high in the history of the world. Now there's talk maybe if it gets a lot worse, which it could, that districts may have to curtail extracurricular activities. Is that a real possibility?
No, it's not at all. The state budget is looking really, really positive for schools in terms of the influx of new money that they're going to get. And I don't see that as a possibility. There aren't going to be any program cuts whatsoever in schools this coming year because of the funds that are going to come their way. So certainly extracurricular activities are still a go.
All right. Let's head south to Pennsylvania. There is a landmark trial that has been going on there for several months. This is a really big deal in Pennsylvania. It has to do with the state school funding formula. That trial is wrapping up. There were closing arguments last week. What's at stake here, Ralph?
Well, going back to 2016 when Governor Wolf first became the governor, Pennsylvania had the most inequitable funding system in the whole U.S.
Yeah.
So last year, there was a lawsuit filed asking for a fair funding formula. So after all these weeks of testimony, they're expecting an outcome, and I think you'll see that there will be a ruling that says the state has to go to full funding, which is good for the children.
Yeah, and that trial started back in November, so that one's been going on a while. The testing is about to get underway for 3rd through 8th graders in New York. This is those standardized ELA exams, math exams that are done every spring. I got a question from a local teacher who wants to know, Ralph, will these tests reflect the learning loss that has been caused by COVID the past couple years?
They certainly will reflect the learning loss. There have already been some studies done, and for instance, one study showed that 35% of the students K through 2 were missing the reading benchmarks, 35% missing them as compared to 21% back in 2019. And another study showed that half of the students in kindergarten were missing the benchmark, which is really tragic. And in first grade, the results are the same. So, yeah, there's going to be a new low in terms of meeting the benchmarks amongst our children. And I believe it is to do with the pandemic.
Yeah. And then finally, real quick, for those who make it a point to vote every year at their local school board election in May, there's some news on that front, legislation pending in the state assembly and the state senate that has to do with absentee ballots. Explain that, Ralph.
Yeah, during the pandemic, there was legislation passed allowing for anybody to vote by absentee ballot. And even though the pandemic is much reduced, which is a great thing, there is legislation pending, and I'm sure it will pass and be signed by the governor that will allow the continuation of that absentee ballots at least for this coming vote in May.
All right. And again, if you are interested in running for your local school board, Ralph, you have several videos on your website that really offer practical instruction on how to get that ball rolling. If you would, sir, where can folks find out more?
People can simply go to yrun.org, yrun.org.